Welcome back to Sunday Brunch Live. We've been joined once again by astronaut Chris Hadfield, and it's not every day you get to meet someone who's left the planet and gone out.
Three times,
and you just made me laugh because I said it must be hard to get medical insurance. You said, yeah, well, you're nowhere near a hospital when you're up there, so it's quite a long. Now, we've asked the viewers to send in questions. We've got questions there. My daughter, though, Grace, she's there. She asked me a question this morning. I have no idea what the answer is, and I thought it was quite an interesting question. What time is it in space?
You could choose. You go around the world every 90 minutes, so you could pretty much choose any time you want. But this watch I wore on my wrist the whole time I was in space. We actually set it on London time, Greenwich time.
Greenwich Mean
Time. So we live on Greenwich Mean Time.
That's right. What she said.
They London time.
GMT, because time is quite a new phenomenon, really. It's only a couple of thousand years old, isn't it?
Yeah, wristwatch is even newer. And we had to sort of compromise between Houston and Moscow, so we chose London, England. Works fine.
When you look at the world, do you think, time doesn't really exist anymore, or are you conscious of...
Well, you have to wake up and go to bed at a certain, and we just chose London. It's as good. It's as good a. It's actually called Universal Coordinated Time.
Lauren wants to know then, how do astronauts sleep? Do they float whilst they're asleep?
Yeah, I mean, normally you would need to sleep lying down in a bed, of course, on Earth, but without gravity, you can just float the whole time. But you need to tether yourself so you don't float away and get bumping into things.
How do you keep the duvet on?
So we have a sleeping bag that we go into, and then we just tie the sleeping bag to the wall with like a shoelace, and then you just float around weightless with your arms back to Christmas. Put your arms completely relaxed. Every muscle in your body is relaxed. It's the most wonderful sleep you could possibly imagine.
I'd love to do that.
Yeah, I think you can market that part of it. For sure, it's wonderful.
Dan, you got a question, haven't you?
I have a question. So when you're up there, do you just stare out the window at Earth the whole time? Or are people just there with their iPads watching Breaking Bad?
The view out the window is even better than Breaking Bad, if you can believe it.
No!
I took 45,000 pictures of the world in the 5 months that I was up there because it's just so enormously beautiful. And I went halfway around the sun while I was living on the space station, from one side of the sun to the other over 5 or 6 months. So the seasons change from winter to summer around the whole world, and so it's constantly different and mesmerizingly gorgeous. I didn't watch 1 second of television the whole time.
Can you get a signal up there, phone signal?
Very briefly. No.
Okay. Just as you pass through.
No.
Kim, we'll come to you in a minute. We just want to make sure we're getting some viewers as well. Tom says, do you think there are other forms of life out there?
We've recently, with the Hubble telescope and the Kepler telescope, we have shown that in our galaxy alone, we think there are 20 billion habitable planets. Just in our galaxy. Wow. And there are millions and millions of galaxies. So to think we're the only life in the universe is just kind of arrogance, really. But how come they haven't visited? And how come, if they are visiting, they're whizzing around in little tiny flying saucers, which I don't believe? That's an interesting question. We don't know why. But to think that we're the only life in the universe is just kind of a magnified sense, I think, of importance. With the stuff we found on Mars in the last week is really interesting. They've had freshwater lakes for millions of years on Mars, and we found the sedimentary record of it. So maybe life developed on Mars.
Is it China landed on the moon yesterday?
They did.
With a rover, not people. Is it good that they're doing that?
Oh, I think so. It's the natural direction we're going to go. It's just inevitable. It's just a matter of when and what drives it and trying to trade it in amongst the costs of everything else. But we left Earth 13 years ago. We've been living on the space station since the year 2000, sort of sailing within sight of land, and we'll figure out enough stuff there to sail sort of across the seas to the moon and beyond over the next few generations. And the Chinese have taken one of the steps here tomorrow. It's great to see.
Do you see it as being a conglomeration that everyone will join forces?
I think that's really the best part of it. It's the International Space Station. Any kid in the world can go outside and watch an example of something going over when we do things as a group, as a whole species. It's a really nice example of how to do things right. And I think we'll go to the moon the same way.
Kim, your question?
I was just wondering, when you're in the ship, do you feel the momentum of the Earth as it moves? Can you feel anything about that?
Kim, you would love it. It is. You are so beautifully, perpetually, gracefully weightless. It's like a ballet. You can just fly, and the world is just silently rolling by next to you. It's as if someone touched you on the head and said you can fly. It's just a wonderful ballet of life.
But do you feel the hugeness of the planet? Can you feel that
yeah,
too?
it's like I think it's maybe like being a little tiny fish next to a whale, and you're just kind of in awe of the massiveness of it. But the visual nature of it, the gorgeousness of it, is constantly pouring in as well.
How big's the Earth when you're on the on the space station?
Well, from overhead here, you can see Istanbul. From overhead London. I mean, you can see that much of the world. We're only that high up.
Right, okay.
So you can see a big section of the world,
Right.
but you go around it every 90 minutes and it turns underneath you. So it's as if it's constantly showing you a whole sector of it rolling by. And the northern lights, and I've been outside on a spacewalk going through the northern lights with them pouring up underneath my feet. And yeah, it's gorgeous.
Little Mix, have you got a question?
I have two.
Yes.
You know when you're on a ride and you just lift off the ground a bit and you get that tickly feeling in your tummy? Do you have that constantly, or is it just normal?
No, that right after the engine shut off. It takes about 9 minutes to get to space, and right as the engine shut off, suddenly you get exactly that feeling, like you've gone from gravity to nothing, and everything floats, and your hair floats up, and your clothes float up, and your checklist, and everything floats. And so that transition, your body kind of goes, whoa, you know, what's happening? But then after a while, you get completely used to it. You become graceful and adapted to being weightless, which is really fun.
Is it when you actually take off, the exhilaration of that, the G-force?
It's the most powerful and dangerous thing I've done in my life. You are crushed into the spaceship, squished back down into your chair with this enormous amount of force and vibration. It's as if you were in the most powerful car in the world with your foot to the floor for 9 minutes. And at the end of it, you're going 17,500 miles an hour, or 8 kilometers a second, 5 miles a second, 25 times faster than sound.
So what are the big dangers then when you're doing that? The G-force can crush you.
No, the dangers are the vehicle is pushing its way through the atmosphere, and you have huge rockets running behind you, and so if you're in space for half a year, half of your risk is in the first 9 minutes. If you try and calculate the odds of dying, 50% of all the risk of 6 months in space is while you're riding the rocket ship, because it's just so dynamic. And it's all
What's
the
it
things
like
are happening.
re-entering then? What's the experience of that?
I've come in on the shuttle twice, which is not too much different than an airliner, a little bit more violent. But coming in on the Soyuz, which I did the last time, the Russian spaceship, it's like riding a meteorite home. I mean, you come plummeting into the atmosphere, and then a parachute opens, and then you come down, and you can see it on the screen here, undocking from the space station. You come down into this parachute, and then you crash into the ground like a car crash. And you tumble and roll, and the Russians come and open the hatch and drag you out and plunk you into a chair and give you an apple to eat. And it's quite a transition.
And what's it like when your body hits gravity again?
You're like,
oh, I'm so heavy now.
Oh yeah. At first, I'd forgotten that you actually have to lift up your tongue to talk. I had a weightless tongue for 5 months. You get used to, even your lips have weight. You have to pick up your arm, which just seems so unfair.
I just can't imagine that at all. It's amazing.
Gravity's so overrated.
Yeah, it's a shame.
Okay. Oh, Chris, we could talk all day, but sadly we've got to move on, which is such a shame.
Thank you,
in a moment, it's Drinky Booze time, but first, how is his intent? I'm not celebrating his birthday in this week's Fresh Meat.